But what I find interesting is, and why I appreciate you being willing to talk to me. So I carved out my career uh, really breaking through the industry back in the 90s and 2000s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s, designing audience experiences. So it's kind of in my DNA now to think about the audience and what you want me to talk about.
Sure.
But what kills me is I get all these approaches to do podcasts and they just want to schedule and go. And it's like, well, how about how about we just have a discussion to see what would make sense for your audience? Doesn't that
Sure.
make sense?
Yeah.
And that's how I like to operate. So I've actually felt a little uncomfortable with some of them because they don't, I don't know, maybe they're so big, they don't even want to talk to me. There's, oh, just book it, just schedule it, we'll go. It's like,
Yeah.
well, because I can talk. There's several things that I want to know. I want to know about your audience.
Yeah.
Who are they? What do they want? What's going to
Absolutely.
intrigue them? Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So anyway, so thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, just so you know, my bread and butter is jazz radio. I've been doing that since 2011. Um,
Okay.
I got into broadcasting in college and got into sports radio, and I was like, yeah, I don't think so. I'm out. I just couldn't do it. So kind of put it to rest. And then I started doing journalism part-time because I've been a writer. And I ran into a guy that had a radio show called the Neon Beat. And it was the Rat Pack and the American Songbook, that whole thing. So we hook up, and he happens to just live like 4 blocks from me, and he has a whole studio in his basement that his wife converted for him into a studio, and he got all this old equipment because he was an engineer for a major radio station in town.
Okay.
So he's like, write a script and come over. So I write jazz, and I've been doing it for a long time, but interspersed, I would just find people that I found interesting and say, hey, do you want to interview? And we'd interview. So Podmatch, they approached me, and I'm like, all right, let me give it a shot. And I started interviewing people. So I came up with this whole new feed, which is famous interviews. So my audience is pretty broad. And it could intersperse into the music people too. So there's kind of these Venn diagrams that come together for a nice, happy little Humpty Dumpty moment. So that's kind of
Okay.
what I
All
do.
right.
Yeah.
I
So,
started my career in the music industry, so
oh, cool. Okay. Well, then that's good.
I started as an audio engineer, and I had golden ears in high school. And when I got out of high school, I was kind of well, I wasn't kind of, I was mentored by some engineers who got me in the studio, but one of them really helped me start building a career in live audio. So I'd run sound. I have kind of an engineering background myself,
Yeah.
or kind of a science and technology thing, and thought that's what I wanted to do. So I not only mixed audio, but I started developing a career to design large concert audio systems. So I ran sound for, it's funny because I tell people, when I started my audio career, it was with bands that were either on their way down or on their way up. So I've run sound for Blue Oyster Cult, and I mean, I've got a litany of, classic rock bands, and because this was back in the 80s, right? When I'm 63, so I've been
Sure.
around a little bit.
Yeah.
And but I got bored with that.
Yeah.
And then that's how I got into set design, lighting, and then writing and directing and producing. And I got picked up by a company that did we did these really large, like global product reveals and multi-million-dollar budget kind of things.
Yeah.
Did that for a few years, and I always had this kind of, I didn't always, not kind of, I had this kind of technical side. And so I ended up inventing automated show control. So that's the ability to computerize everything. So lighting cues, it's all standard and built into mixing consoles and light boards now. And then there's show control systems that kind of bring it all together. But me and my colleagues and teams were doing it very rudimentary, and then I got hooked up with a company out of Sweden, and we actually turned it into a formal product
Okay.
that kind of took the industry by storm for a while. And they're still going great guns. But I've since moved on from that with other startups, and keeping my consulting practice going all along the way. 30 years in Silicon Valley,
Okay.
and multiple startups, and worked with a company that did an IPO, and then my own startup. So I've had both successes, but also failures, bombs.
Sure. Sure.
And now I'm just at a different point in my life now where I want to share with as many people as I can something that I discovered 25 or so plus years ago. And that was, in fact, my office was like 2 blocks from Apple Computer in Cupertino. And we were just starting out, but it was like having our hair on fire. I mean, the business environment was just smoking hot.
Yeah.
And we just couldn't hardly keep up with it all. And I was expected, I was a new creative guy in town because I was originally from Portland, Oregon. And, I was expected to be creative on demand, and I got stuck, really stuck. And I owed this client a creative brief the following morning that I was going to pitch to him. And it's like 11:30 at night. I'm in my office and I'm staring at a whiteboard, and, the stress was palpable, right? You could feel your heart beating, And I had been working on this thing for a while, but I didn't know where to take it from where I was at the time. And so I just, don't ask me how, I remembered a technique that a mentor of mine had taught me about 10 years prior, for activating and harnessing your imagination, but it was in a different context. It wasn't in a business context. And so I kind of thought to myself, well, what the heck do I have to lose, And I kind of struggled to remember how it went and whatnot. So I sat myself in and coached myself through this technique, and it really is amazing. It's kind of life-changing, quite frankly, when you can really harness that power. But what it did is it sparked a journey of really, I started asking the question, well, what would Da Vinci do? What would Edison do? What would all the, Steve Jobs is down the street, right? What would he do? And over the course of the next couple of years, because I knew that I knew this was going to happen again. I was even calling my competitors. Hey, John, what do you do when you get stuck? I mean, like, really stuck. How do you get over, do you take a walk? I mean, you see all this crap on LinkedIn, and not LinkedIn. Well, yeah, LinkedIn too, but YouTube, it's all bullshit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I really started a journey to discover what creativity is and how do you fuel it. And now, at the time, I was already really more than a thought leader. I was really led the industry in applying the tenets of brain science to an audience experience for maximum impact and retention. Because I was one of the foremost authorities on the neuroscience of how our brains consume an experience, and how we consume media, and what are memory triggers, and what are the things that, so that, I mean, I would have clients that would call me 6 months later and say, Greg, I've never said this before, but the opening video you did for our sales team 6 months ago, they're still talking about it.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I kind of looked at this in the same way. I said, well, there's got to be something going on in your brain when it comes to creativity, and what is it, right? And back then, we actually didn't know that much about, it was something that was supposed to just happen, right? You didn't put creativity in a box.
Yeah.
Now we know a lot of the neuroscience behind it through fMRIs and research psychologists that have done, lab work with people and whatnot. And so I started, discovering all those things that we'd been learning along the way. And what I found is when you look at like the world's most significant innovators, and you read their diaries and the contemporaneous accounts of them, they talk about it. They don't so much talk about their inventions, they talk more about how they came up with their ideas.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter where they are in the timeline of history, they were all saying pretty much the same thing. So I paid really close attention to that. And what I discovered was a pattern and a sequence. What, out of 29 common attributes that I discovered, some of those attributes were I called them thinking and doing habits. They were skills and behaviors that I kept seeing over and over and over again, and then almost performed in a sequence. So I drew this timeline, and I'm trying to figure all this stuff out, as well as I'm running an agency that's we're growing like crazy and whatnot. And it basically kind of revealed itself to me. There were these 7 basic elements or building blocks. I call them building blocks. It's what's in that tower right there.
Yeah.
And each one is comprised of a core breakthrough skill, and cognitive, some kind of behavior. And some of them a couple. But this pattern and sequence I kept seeing in the technology world with successful entrepreneur, innovators, as well as artists and musicians, the band Queen, and where you listen to Brian May, and he talks about their experience on the farm, which was their kind of retreat studio that they cut some of their most iconic songs at. And same with Led Zeppelin, and listen to Jimmy Page talk about how they, how Stairway to Heaven came about. So I have a diagram. The same exact pattern and sequence keeps showing up throughout. So I used that, and I started doing public speaking on it years ago. And oh my God, people would line up and they wanted to hear more, and they were, I couldn't keep up with it all, and because of this agency that I was trying to grow, and then I had these startups on this going as well, and it was just kind of a crazy time. So I just kind of shut it all down and kept it as a competitive advantage. Applying this framework, I call it the framework for inventive thinking, but applying this framework that's comprised of these 7 building blocks. And there's kind of 3 dimensions to it. And these 3 dimensions I keep seeing over and over again when I read books and stuff. In fact, are you familiar with Walter Isaacson? He wrote like the official biography of Steve Jobs, and he's just written one on Elon Musk. And he wrote a book called The Innovators.
Yeah.
And it's really long. I mean, it's like crazy forever long. This book is huge. But he takes you through really, it's really more about significant innovators throughout time that like invented the calculator, and on through the computer. So it's very technology driven. That's what its real focus is. And I'm like reading this, or well, actually I listened to it on Audible, and I'm like, oh my God, that's the framework. Oh my God, that's the framework. Oh my God, that's 7i. Oh my God, that's and so with each one, what I did is I started finding the research, the scientific research that basically supports or backs up every one of these elements. And I have one client left that I do some consulting with, and I do some creative production work for. And the rest of my time over the last several years has been putting together very carefully a training program, and now we've decided to give there's kind of 2 parts of the training. There's kind of almost, if you want to call it the basic program, and then kind of an ongoing mastery part of it, because it's one thing to learn about it, and then it's another to apply it on a daily basis. But so what I was charging $3,000 for, or $2,600 for, I'm now giving it away for free.
Wow.
And I'm just at a different point in my life where I've come up with this thing called the Inventive Guild. It's the name of the company. And we've got people that are now wanting to join. We're going to be delivering the mastery part of the program within that, but within that is going to be a marketplace of ideas, and a way for people who really want to become insanely inventive can, it's almost like a community of like-minded people and whatnot. But yeah, so we're out to offer the Renaissance Thinking on Demand, kind of doing it as a 7-day challenge. And the challenge, I hate challenges, but the challenge is, challenges are so bogus.
I agree.
But this is a real challenge.
Yeah.
Because I will give it to you if you will complete it in 7 days.
Okay.
It's 5.5 hours.
Okay.
If you complete it in 7 days, give me some feedback. Gotta answer some questions on a web page, and refer 5 people. It's free. You got nothing to lose. Refer 5 people. You get it for free. They're going to get it for free anyway. I mean,
right.
It's a social. It's not like I'm going to go back and charge them if they don't. Right. it's a social contract. But so our goal is we want to offer this to 1 million people in 12 months.
Okay. That's wonderful. You have done a wonderful orchestration of so many questions and things that I wanted to go through. You just kind of weave through it. You've created a podcast dialogue that has hit so many points. I do want to I want to fill in a couple holes here though.
Sure.
How did this happen? You said you were from Portland. How did these seeds grow in you? How did the curiosity and inventiveness and all of these pieces become you?
I've thought about that. I don't know if I have the right answer for it, but I can tell you this about that I think may have something to do with it. I grew up as an only child, so I played a lot by myself. And I had cousins and stuff like that, but and friends in the neighborhood and whatnot. But from day one, I can remember back digging holes in the ground and creating living quarters. Wow. Underground. And even today, I have this affinity for, these incredibly architected living quarters, au natural, right? In spaces, that don't look like traditional houses and whatnot. But I really did have, so maybe my curiosity might have been inspired a little bit by a little TV show I saw on Da Vinci, and I don't remember a lot about it. I remember being very young, but I thought we had the same birthday. And as it turns out, our birthdays are 1 day apart. Mine's April 14th, his is April 15th. Wow. But I thought his was April 14th for the longest time.
Yeah.
And so, and I grew up on the Italian side of the family, and he was Italian. So I just kind of had this affinity for Da Vinci. But even then we didn't know a lot about him like we do now. We know a lot about, there's been historians and people that have gone through all of this. Do you know that in fact, I just saw 7,000 pages, and I don't know if that's confirmed, but I know confirmed, 5,000 pages of transcripts and drawings. 5,000. Who does that, right?
Yeah, I've been to his hometown. I traveled out there and
Yeah.
saw his sketchings with both hands in person. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And you know, paper back then was big,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And it
yeah,
was really expensive. So you filled up all of it, right? That's
yeah,
why you had, you know, because it wasn't cheap.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
True.
Anyway, so maybe that had something to do with it. I just remember growing up, you know, my grandfather had a small shop, you know, part of his garage or whatever. And and I ended up with a talent that he had, and that is he hardly ever measured anything. And I can do that too. I can point to the center of a wall. I can look at a wall and tell you within about an eighth of an inch where the center point is.
Yeah,
And you know, it's I don't know, but he made stuff, and I like to make, you know, I would like build battleships out of 2x4 scraps and stuff, and but I've always had this curiosity of just what makes things tick. You know, I was the kid who took the clock apart, couldn't put it back together, but I took it apart.
yeah,
It pissed
yeah,
off my mom, you
yeah.
know. and and um and I just went, you know, in high school, I had this injury in it was my sophomore year. And I was an athlete, but it was was it during football season? I don't remember. Thank God it wasn't before track, or it wasn't during track season, but I couldn't do PE class. I had a splint on my arm. I got an injury on my forearm and splint and stuff. So PE teacher said, well, you got to spend the time in the library, and you're not just going to sit there. So do a book report. You know, I want you to do something. And I don't remember, it was for, you know, whatever number of weeks I had to have this, you know, splint on. So in books, I don't know. I was never really fiction books. I always had a hard time. So I challenged I read the entire World Book Encyclopedia A through Z.
Wow, wow.
And but I just always had this curiosity. I want to know it all. I want to, you know, I want to know it all. But what I discovered later on is creativity is not about knowing it all. However, what we've learned is that, look, we all have the same, think of creativity as like an engine. Okay. In our brain, it's actually made up, it's actually the most calorie consuming, it's the most active thing your brain can do is during a creative endeavor. I've got actually I've got a video that I use in a lot of my presentations called The Glass Brain. It's on YouTube. A professor at University of San Francisco or San Francisco State, a neurologist, got together with a 3D company, and he took EEG data, and they did an animation where the brain looks like it's glass, and because they wanted to see what happens during a creative endeavor. And, you know, it dispels the myth of left brain, right brain, you know, because it's your whole brain, it's your entire brain. But what we do know is creativity really is the engine is really 3 of about 17 neural networks that really get fired up. And they each kind of have their own, you know, function. But we all have that. Everybody has the same creative potential. Our brains are not that different from each other. What makes us different as humans, besides we look a little different, though there are people that look like us, you know, around the world somewhere,
Yeah.
is I think our DNA is what, 99.9% the same.
Yeah.
Our genome. So it's only 1/10 of 1% difference between us. And but what makes it different is what that engine calls on to make a new mental connection, because that's actually the definition of creativity, is making a new mental connection, creating something kind of new, unique, whatever, new and unique to you or to the world. And there's different levels of creativity. Kaufman Baguetto did a lot of work on that. And so it's based on the inventory in your brain. That's why this notion, and I hear it all the time in TED Talks and stuff, we got to get to our childhood of creativity. No, we don't. We really don't. You don't want to do that. That's just going backwards. There are things that we've been trained not to do. We have to unlearn those. The school system has trained us to not be open-minded and to, not do the things that lead to creativity. But a 7-year-old is not going to come up with a new rocket engine. You need that knowledge, that information. It's like inventory. If your brain's going to put together make a mental connection out of two associative things as it looks for patterns, well, it's got to be in your brain for it to do that. Otherwise, it's not going to do that, right? So maybe, maybe just all the, that thirst for knowledge and, being a lifelong learner, I'm sure it has a lot to do with it, because it's given my brain a lot of inventory. And I got a lot of worthless information up there, believe me. My family always rags on me because I'm always coming up with weird, trivial things that, nobody really cares about. But for some reason, my brain, it's just already up there. But anyway, so I'm artistically inclined, I'm musically inclined, but there's kind of a technology side to it all. And I think about, you just the whole kind of how you started with the jazz as being kind of a anchor topic, maybe, or whatever. So a lot of the work that Csikszentmihalyi did on flow and creativity was initially inspired by his research of jazz musicians. Yeah, I lost your audio.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't realize.
Yeah, so he talks about it in his book Flow. And the two are very they're not one and the same, but they're very connected.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was doing some, he started asking those questions. What is it about jazz musicians when they get into the zone, right? And there's athletes that get into the zone. And so what is this zone? And so he started, he had a partner, and they started researching. He was at the University of Chicago, I think. He started researching with jazz musicians and interviewing them and watching them, and lots of them, right? And this whole zone thing. And that actually was the kernel of his research in flow state.
That's interesting. That's very, very interesting. So you've done a phenomenal job of laying out exactly your challenge and how you got to this point. So I'm curious, for everyone out there, where can they get involved with any more information on this, to do the challenge, to learn more about you and what you're doing? Where can they go?
I would suggest 2 places. One is my LinkedIn. I will answer anybody and give them links to look at things a little more closely. So Greg Moyer at LinkedIn, and then we're getting ready to launch. So I have 2 websites right now, and we're getting ready to launch the website where we're going to be offering the free course, renaissancethinking.com. And it's live right now, but I don't have the sign up form live yet. But when I say we're close, we're within like a week or 2.
Okay, wonderful. Greg, this has been fascinating. I appreciate you opening up. I appreciate you laying it out. I hope you feel like this was a comfortable environment. You got it all out.
Yeah, this has been awesome.
Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much. I appreciate it.